All right, let's dive right into one of the biggest questions we can ask. What really makes you, you? We're about to explore the incredible science behind our own minds, our personalities, and the world that helps shape who we are. But first, let me ask you something. Just think about it for a second. All your thoughts, your gut feelings, your decisions, how much of that do you think you're really in the driver's seat for? Like, are you consciously controlling 90% of it, 50%? The real answer is probably going to shock you.
Yeah, according to the research, it is a tiny fraction. Most of what's happening upstairs, the incredible machinery that's building your entire reality second by second, you don't have access to it. It's kind of like you're the CEO of this massive corporation, but you only ever get to see the final press release. So let's pull back the curtain and see what's really running the show.
We're going to start with the most basic, most fundamental part of all this, consciousness itself. What even is it, and what's it for? This right here is so important to understand. For, centuries, people thought of consciousness as some kind of magic, some mysterious ghost in the machine. But what neuroscience shows us is that it's a biological process. It's a series of operations happening in the physical hardware of your brain. There's no magic, just unbelievably complex biology at work. Okay, so you might be thinking, if my unconscious is doing all the heavy lifting, what's the point of the conscious part? Well, this slide lays out the key difference. Your unconscious is all about reacting. It's on autopilot, responding to what's happening right now. But your conscious mind, that's your superpower. It gives you the ability to make plans, to set long-term goals, and, crucially, to hit the brakes and override your immediate impulses. It's what lets you break free from just reacting to your environment and lets you act on your own terms.
So these mental processes are the building blocks. Let's see how they come together to create the patterns we call personality. What's the blueprint that makes each and every one of us so unique? You know, it's funny, the word personality actually means two pretty different things. On the one hand, you've got your reputation. That's how other people see you, the impression you make. Think of it as your outside-in personality. But then you've also got your identity. That's who you feel you are on the inside, your true self. That's the inside-out view. Both are totally valid, and you really need to understand both to get the full picture of a person.
Now, it's one thing to have a personality, but how does that personality hold up when life, inevitably gets hard? And that brings us to something absolutely critical, resilience. So what do we really mean by resilience? To put it simply, it's our ability to adapt in a healthy way when we're facing tough times, or to get back on our feet when things have already gone sideways. It's not about being bulletproof, it's about our amazing capacity to bounce back. And where does this resilience come from? Well, researchers have kind of boiled it down to three main categories of protective factors. First, you've got your inner circle, your close family, your best friends. Second is that wider net of community support. And third, there's your own personal toolkit. Things like intelligence, optimism, your ability to manage your emotions. But out of those three, one of them isn't just a little more important. It's in a league of its own. The single strongest predictor of whether someone will be resilient is the quality of their close personal relationships. Not their personal grit, not how smart they are, but their connections to other people. Good, supportive relationships literally act as a buffer against stress and give us the security we need to thrive. This quote really says it all, doesn't it? It captures what decades of research have found. Our own personal strengths are vital, for sure, but they just don't work as well without a support system. We're wired to be social creatures, and a huge part of our strength comes from our connections. So we've got our minds, our personalities, our support systems. Now let's look at how we put it all to work, how we navigate the world and solve the thousands of problems, big and small, that we face every day. This is so fascinating. Experts and beginners don't just know different amounts of stuff. Their brains literally work in a different way. A novice, a beginner, has to rely on general rules and try to figure things out from scratch. But an expert? They have this huge internal library of patterns they've built up from years of experience. They don't see a totally new problem. They see a variation of something they've seen 1,000 times before. And this is the expert's secret weapon, their superpower. Because they can instantly recognize a situation as a familiar pattern, they don't really have to solve it from the ground up. They just have to decide which of their tried and true solutions is the right one for this specific case. They turn a messy, complicated problem into a much simpler choice. Okay, we've spent a lot of time looking inward at how our minds work, but the kinds of problems we face aren't decided in a vacuum.
For our last section, we need to zoom way out and look at one of the most powerful forces that shapes our inner reality: social class.
And what's wild is that for all its influence, social class is a topic that psychology has often, well, kind of ignored. We talk a lot about race, gender, and other identities, but the massive psychological impact of where you stand economically has often been left on the sidelines. Let's look at why that's such a huge blind spot. The scale of the economic divide today is just staggering. Let's run through some numbers. In the United States, the top 0.1% of earners have incomes 220 times greater than the average person in the bottom 90%.
Let me put that a different way because that number is hard to wrap your head around. It takes that top group just a day and a half, 1.5 days, to earn what the bottom 90% earn in an entire year.
And this isn't a static thing. The gap has been getting wider and fast. Between 1979 and 2007 alone, the wealth of the top 1% shot up by an incredible 275%.
So, what's the real-world consequence of all this? It means that compared to other similar Western countries, the U.S. now has the lowest financial mobility. The rungs on the economic ladder are just spaced farther apart, making it harder and harder for people at the bottom to climb up.
And this brings us right back to our central question about what makes you, you. A gap this huge isn't just an economic statistic. It is a profound psychological force. It has to fundamentally shape your outlook on life, your sense of security, your hopes, your fears. It creates entirely different worlds that people experience, even if they live in the same country. Which leaves us with this final, challenging thought to chew on. Yes, we are a product of our consciousness, our personalities, our resilience, but we're also a product of the world we're born into. So the ultimate question really is, how much of your story do you actually get to write yourself? And how much of it was already written for you the day you were born?